Thanks everyone for joining us. I'm Jordan Rutter, Director of Communications at American Bird Conservancy. American Bird Conservancy, shortened to ABC, was founded in 1994 with the mission of protecting wild birds and their habitats across the Americas. Our work is guided by a conservation strategy outlined by the pyramid featured on the current slide. With an emphasis on achieving results and working in partnership, ABC takes on the greatest problems facing birds today, innovating and building on rapid advancements in science to prevent bird extinctions, reverse bird population declines, reduce threats to all birds, and build the conservation movement, which is why we're so excited you're here with us today. To help make that possible, ABC focuses on the full annual life cycle of birds across the Americas. This means we work with partners throughout the Western Hemisphere, taking actions to conserve birds wherever they are and wherever their journeys take them. This means that ABC is able to focus on addressing the needs of migratory birds, such as the long-billed curlew, which spend their breeding seasons in the northern Great Plains of the US and southern Canada, and winters in places as far south as Guatemala and Honduras. And endemic or resident birds, such as the short-crested coquette, which can only be found in the state of Guerrero, Mexico, year-round. And bird conservation works. Over the last 30 years, working with hundreds of partners, ABC has conserved millions of acres of habitat for birds across the Americas. More than 3,000 species have benefited from this important work. That's 70% of all bird species in the Western Hemisphere and 30% of bird species in the world. But there's so much more to do, and ABC needs your help to do it. As we celebrate our 30th anniversary this year, ABC is also looking ahead to the next 30 years and working to implement a large-scale vision to conserve the next 10 million acres of bird habitat. We're calling it the 10 Million Acre Challenge, and one thing is clear. We need generous bird enthusiasts like you by our side to make this ambitious goal a reality, and we're asking that you join us in that challenge. For a limited time, the Richard and Anne Marie Rosen Charitable Foundation has generously offered to immediately match gifts made in recognition of ABC's 30th anniversary year up to a total of $200,000. Plus, when you contribute $100 or more right now, you'll receive an exciting and exclusive gift, a set of 5 note cards featuring beautiful illustrations by best-selling author Amy Tan from her new book, The Backyard Bird Chronicles. It's the perfect time to become an ABC member or make your most generous gift yet, knowing it'll be doubled for bird conservation. So please visit abcbirds.org/double now or scan the code on today's slide with your phone to make your gift. Thank you so much for caring about birds, and a special thank you to all of our ABC members and donors in the audience right now. You're making a difference for wild birds and their habitats every single day, and I promise you that I see that in my work. So thank you. With so many birds, habitats, and more, we won't have time in this webinar to get into every detail about everything that the incredible ABC staff and partners are currently doing. However, I'm very excited to have 3 different projects to share today that help represent the amazing work being done. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our speakers. First up, we have Kevin Ellison. He is ABC's Northern Great Plains Program Manager. He has more than 28 years of experience conducting research in avian ecology, and since 2013, his work has focused on assessing grassland bird data from the levels of species populations down to individual ranches. Working with over 100 ranchers in the Great Northern Plains, Kevin has conducted surveys of grassland birds to quantify the benefits of ranching for grassland birds. Jeff Bennett is the habitat restoration hydrologist at the Rio Grande joint venture. Jeff worked as a hydrologist for the National Park Service in Big Bend National Park and the Rio Grande Wild and Scenic River. He was involved with developing the science to support environmental flows for the Rio Grande, as well as implementing grassland and stream restoration projects. And he's been working on conservation issues in the Big Bend region for over 15 years. Roberto Carlos Almazán is a professor and researcher at the Autonomous University of Guerrero School of Biology. He is an ornithologist with 25 years of experience in the study and conservation of neotropical birds in the south of Mexico, and his studies have largely focused on cloud forests and dry tropical forests. And last but not least, we have Amy Upgren, who will be giving a special message at the end of the presentations and helping us answer questions in the Q&A box. She's ABC's Director of International Programs and has served as the Alliance for Zero Extinctions Coordinator since 2016. And with that, I'll now turn it over to Kevin. Kevin, if you want to get set up.
All right. Thank you, Jordan. Can you see my presentation in
You're
presentation
still,
mode yet?
if you just hit that present mode,
All right.
that'd be great.
It's not letting me get to that button here. Hang on. There we go. How's that?
Perfect. Take it away.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining the webinar today. It's great to be able to talk to you about some of our work that we do in the Northern Great Plains and our birds that are effectively tri-national, crossing borders. Today I was going to focus more on our habitat work in the Northern Great Plains, and I can show you some maps on that as well. But just wanted to show you some of the key species that we're working with, particularly the long-billed curlew, and get into how we've prioritized working on that species to conserve grasslands. So to get at it first, right away, this is North America's largest sandpiper. My hand's there for scale. It's kind of like a pigeon-sized bird, but still a sandpiper. About 2 foot tall or 61 centimeters tall, and about 2 pounds heavy or 950 grams. And so to get at it right away, why the long bill? Kind of a unique apparatus. It's soft at the tip. You might think it looks like quite a weapon or something, but it's actually kind of flexible at the tip for feeling around for prey in soil and sand. So these sandpipers are interesting in that they occur along shorelines, as you would expect a sandpiper to, but they also breed in inland prairies. So they have to use this beak as kind of a Swiss Army knife of a tool for themselves to get food. The longer bills allow the birds to get deeper into the soil or sand to get different prey items. Curlews like to eat crabs and shrimp and grasshoppers on the Great Plains quite a bit. So they're pretty good at using their bills almost like chopsticks. And here are a couple images of them on the shore catching little crabs, and you can see how they are able to use those bills to get the food to their mouths. What's interesting about the distribution of the long-billed curlew is that it's changed over time. You can see the blue outline is the historical breeding range, the historical extent to the breeding range, and then the filled in blue is where they breed at present day. So basically you can see that there's been some changes in the habitat use during the breeding season, and I was going to get into some more hows and whys behind that. As you might expect, knowing kind of the colonial history as we develop land for row crop agriculture, that changes the habitat. And as land use becomes more intense, with less grassland, there's less habitat for the curlews to nest in. So you can see that they used to occur into the Midwest, and then where those grasslands have been lost, the curlews are now largely west of the Missouri River for breeding populations. But again, breeding into Canada and wintering down into Mexico and into Central America. Many of you are probably familiar with eBird and eBird data. This is an interesting visualization that has the different periods of time in color, so you can see the distribution of long-billed curlews relative to time of year. I find it interesting that pretty much wherever birds occur, people think of them as their birds, even though we might just be kind of borrowing them for a short time. You can see in red here, the breeding season is just depicted from mid-May to mid-June. The birds often show up more in mid to late April in the Northern Great Plains, and some of the young of the year might not leave until July. But the females are the first to leave. Basically, they put in all their work on the head end, incubating the eggs. Quite a bit of energy goes into producing those eggs and incubating them. They share incubation with the male, trading off. The males are on the nest at night. And then once those eggs hatch, they're precocial babies that are ready to walk around and feed themselves. And so the male stays and kind of helps watch a creche of young while the female begins to migrate south. So you can see in the United States and Canada, these curlews are only present for maybe 4 months at most, but we often think of them as our curlews returning in the spring, even though they're going to spend most of their year in the Southwest, Mexico, either coast or Central America. What's interesting about the Northern Great Plains is the curlews are not the only species that's coming to breed there. once the snow melts, we have quite long days, so high productivity in insects and plants. And so many species migrate to the plains to breed, and certainly there's several resident species that are a little tougher that hang around year round. But you can see that there's over 20 species that breed kind of in a heartland area of the northern Great Plains. And part of why we work on the long-billed curlew, sorry, this is a little fuzzy, but basically this diagram shows that quite a few things at once, but essentially where you have more grazing, you have shorter grass, and where you have less or no grazing, you have taller grass or shrubs. Those habitat differences that have existed on the Great Plains for millennia, maintained by first free roaming grazers like bison, and today primarily by domesticated livestock, produce the habitats for the grassland birds, and the birds over that long time span that they've been exposed to this habitat disturbance have specialized in different habitats that they occur in. And so you can see by each of these colored bars kind of the habitat preferences of the different species. And some species use those different habitats throughout their life cycle, like the resident species like prairie grouse species. But you can see that the long-billed curlew is kind of the middle child in this group, spanning across those different habitat types. And so that is why we've focused on the long-billed curlew kind of as a umbrella species. You might have heard this term. An umbrella species is a species that can be kind of a target for management that also simultaneously manages for other species. So we've had fun in conservation trying to look at how to depict the concept of an umbrella species. So here's one depiction from Europe on the Eurasian curlew, curlewaction.org work in Europe, species they're trying to help by focusing on conserving habitat for the Eurasian curlew. And then the whimbrill is also a member of the curlew family, and just had a cute image there of a whimbrella. We've tried to generate some with the AI, but you can see not all the birds are coming out right. So stay tuned. We'll try and work on getting better graphics for how curlews can function as umbrella species for other grassland birds. As far as working directly on habitat, we have at ABC have produced a landowner's guide to habitat management for long-billed curlews. The reason we target this information to landowners is that in the Great Plains, we have very little public land. Over 70% of the land is privately owned and managed by private landowners. So working in agriculture with a mix of cropland and or rangeland, and some folks certainly specialize on only one or the other, but really to have conservation occur at biologically relevant scales, we have to work with landowners, and we do that through direct education and outreach, but also through incentive programs to incentivize conservation actions. Curlews are long-lived birds, so population monitoring of adults can miss critical decreases in things like nest success and or survival of the young. So we could think populations are relatively stable, but then have sudden changes if there's not much recruitment of young. So that's why curlews are of real interest. Population estimates are currently at about 180,000 long-billed curlews. So sounds like a pretty large number. Obviously other species, there's millions or billions of individuals, but these populations can decline quite rapidly if there's widespread impacts on the individuals and populations. So basically that combination of high adult survival and low nest success has us focus on nest productivity as an indicator of population health. And might not come as a surprise to many of you, but most of the grassland birds nest on the ground because there's obviously very few trees. And so their best defense against predators is hiding their nests in the grass. Obviously, nesting on the ground, anything that's larger than an egg or a young can eat it. So it's really important to have kind of a large patch of grassland where these birds can re-nest and have multiple nesting attempts to produce young that can be recruited into the population. So nest success is often quite low, but again, they can nest multiple times, oftentimes having to nest like maybe at least twice in a year to pull off young. And again, they need those large patches, which are about 300 to 500 acres of grass and habitat that's at least somewhat similar in stature. Certainly different species can use some of the same patches of grass. They just find that areas within them that they like. If there's patchiness or mixtures of tall and short grass. And as I mentioned, because the curlews come back in April, which is kind of, we still have snow on the ground or still more snow coming sometimes in April, we don't have much of a growing season for the vegetation before the curlews return. So they're really dependent on the previous season's grazing management. And so that's really important in working on the timing and thinking kind of almost a year ahead for curlew habitat with landowners. And also emphasizing that the curlews need different habitats at different points in their nesting cycle because they like to feed in wetlands and wetter areas. They like to nest in short grass areas where their body acts as camouflage for the nest. And then they need taller grass for their young to hide from potential predators. Looking spatially, obviously I showed the eBird data, how the birds move from the north to south and south to north. This is a picture of ABC's birdscapes, which is a way that we use science to prioritize the areas that we're going to work in. So these are areas that are important for many species of birds and have remaining habitat that we can kind of use as core areas to build restoration around. You can see here, most of our work is focused in Texas and Oklahoma, as well as in the Northern Great Plains in kind of the 4 states of Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wyoming. And our goals by 2031 are to get to about just close to 3 million acres conserved in both of those regions. And you can see we've been kind of starting to build staff to a critical scale where we can start to help implement that. Basically, each staff person that we have can usually help conserve about 10 to 20,000 acres a year, depending on the projects that they're working through. And I'll touch on those in a bit. These are areas that we've been focusing long-billed curlew breeding habitat conservation projects in based on bird occurrence, but also working with the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service, which helps put conservation incentive dollars on the ground. We've worked in South Dakota and Montana using a targeted EQIP program. EQIP is Environmental Quality Incentives Program, and we've really focused on the grazing management to produce that curlew habitat for nesting and foraging, and then also where possible and desired to seed kind of more marginal cropland, usually back to native grass to kind of grow the grassland habitat and restore grassland habitat. So you can see we've been able to leverage federal dollars through these agencies, working with private landowners to impact acres of habitat conservation, as well as some of the seeding work as well. And just getting started in Montana with a program that was funded to start this year. In addition to that habitat work, we also perform long-billed curlew surveys. A lot of them have been targeted in Southwest North Dakota, but these allow us to look at these priority areas, these colored blobs within the counties that are outlined here, and keep track of curlew populations as more of an index to see how stable the numbers are across years. The surveys also help us target key areas where the birds occur so that we can try to work with landowners there to do some satellite tagging to track their migration. So we've tagged 15 curlews in North and South Dakota with a mixture of satellite tags as well as cellular tags, which get picked up by cell towers. And you can see here, this is one annual life cycle of a cohort of curlews that we've tagged, males and females. And you can see that birds that breed in the Dakotas, some of them a little more than half winter on the Texas Gulf Coast and northeastern Mexico Gulf Coast, and then others go over to the western Mexico coast. So I often say when we tag birds, we learn things that are biologically interesting, but oftentimes they're kind of messy for conservation because it's not like we just have to protect the habitats in points A and point B, but also throughout that migration, and in this case also different sides of the Mexican area there to make sure we have enough habitat for these birds throughout their life cycle. And I just picked one here to depict how fast these birds can move. You can see within one day, a curlew could leave northern South Dakota and be in Oklahoma by the end of that day. And quite a few of these birds are making it down to Texas in about 12 hours, which is interesting to me, comparing that to humans traveling by airplane as well. So they're pretty good navigators and pilots. You can see also in the map on the left with the multicolors that they're pretty tight with their flights south and flights back north. They aren't wandering all around. They're pretty keenly honed in on where they're traveling to. So with that, I just wanted to thank the many funders that and collaborators and partners that make this work possible. Obviously working with government agencies at the federal and state level, joint ventures that bring those together with nonprofit partners as well, academic partners, and then of course we couldn't do this work without the participation of landowners, volunteers and technicians, and then also a variety of private donors. Some of you might remember we had a magazine campaign for grassland birds and a year back, and that provided some good funding that we were able to use in this conservation work.
Thanks so much, Kevin. Makes me want to get out in the field and see a long-billed curlew for sure. We'll talk to Kevin more at the end of the presentations in the Q&A, but next up we have Jeff to take us a little bit more south virtually to the Rio Grande region. Jeff, if you want to come on camera and get set up for your presentation.
Okay, hopefully you see my screen.
All set, take it away.
Okay. Okay, so thanks everyone for coming today and giving me a chance to present with you some of the stuff that we're doing in West Texas. I work for the Rio Grande joint venture, and Kevin earlier presented a map similar to the one on the left of your screen there. This just illustrates sort of wintering grassland birds, the Baird sparrow and Savannah sparrow and things like birds like that winter in, or excuse me, breed in Canada in the northern plains, the northern U.S., and then winter in the deserts of the Southwest, primarily the Chihuahuan Desert. The graph on the right shows you the decline of grassland bird species, and you can see that in the Chihuahuan Desert, it's a little that decline is a little more dramatic. Okay, I'm not advancing. All right, so here we have a map of the geography of the Rio Grande joint venture. On the right, you can see that we're a binational joint venture. We operate in the Chihuahuan deserts of Texas and in Mexico, as well as the Tamaulipan brushlands of Texas and Mexico, as well as some of the Gulf Coast prairie. We also have a few projects in the Mexican portion of Laguna Madre. The green stars on the right there, in the right map, represent some projects, some riparian projects that we're working on. Grassland birds have been a focus of the joint venture for quite a while. Lately, we've been emphasizing the need for riparian work. To that end, we're gathering some of the groundwork data and information to develop a new birdscape. Kevin mentioned the birdscapes a minute ago, and the map on the left there is what we call Big Bend riparian, and it might become one of the a new ABC birdscape for the Big Bend region of Texas. So why are we emphasizing water more? Well, in arid lands, 70% of all avian species depend upon riparian habitats. 40% of those birds in the desert Southwest are obligates, riparian obligates. In fact, they have to have riparian habitat. Amphibians depend upon stream habitats, and when we talk about stream habitats in the desert, we're not just talking about perennial. We're talking about ephemeral and intermittent streams too. In fact, those are the dominant riparian habitat types in desert landscapes. So the future of wildlife, especially migrating wildlife, is tied to the health of streams and these riparian habitats. And finally, water sources are threatened in the desert Southwest. Most of our aquatic habitat has been degraded. Some estimates as high as 90%, somewhere between 70 and 90%. are no longer functioning as they should. So I want to show a picture of a hydrologic cycle. Some of you all might remember this from 8th grade earth science, but you know, if we're working on habitat, we have to look to the ecology. We have to understand the processes, and understand which processes need help, which processes are broken. So here is a slide of the hydrologic cycle. You can see words that we all recognize: precipitation, evaporation. There's a few new ones there, maybe interception, when rainfall hits a tree and lands on vegetative cover before it lands on the soil. Very important process. So we, as habitat restoration practitioners, we have to look to these processes to understand how to fix the habitat. So you might just watch my slides and see how many different times I've mentioned a process, just to give a little interest here to what we're doing. So in watersheds, we talked about precipitation. We talked about interception a minute ago, and that through fall, when rain lands on vegetative cover, it doesn't land on the soil directly. So that vegetative cover breaks the momentum of that raindrop and lessens its erosive force. So this is a great slide. I think I use it in almost every presentation. On the left, you can see a site that's been heavily grazed, tons of bare ground. We call this a watershed because it sheds water, it doesn't hold on to the water. And on the other side, with lots of grass cover, we call that a water catchment. I think it illustrates a really great point that this is one of the key things we work with when we're talking to our agricultural producing partners is, and many of them actually teach us these kind of ideas that, you know, it's best to leave half, don't take all the grass. So we look for those partners and we work directly with those kind of landowners. Why? Again, back to why we're working on water in the West. We know that streams are degraded. Historical accounts of streams in the Big Bend region indicate that many were bold running streams with cottonwood and full of beaver. That's not the case anymore. The two pictures on the right there are just outside of Big Bend National Park. This is, if you've been there, this is just north of Studi Butte, looking north, and that's Rough Run Creek. In 1970, it was a low water crossing. By 2018, there was a bridge there, and the stream bottom is about 18 feet below that bridge. So in 50 years, we lost almost 20 feet of stream bottom. This has important implications for you know, how streams store water and how they produce riparian habitat. If all the water is rushing through because the stream is incised, those annual flows aren't connected to the floodplain. So the water's not stored in the floodplain and is not available to be used by riparian forests, by even smaller plants like baccaris and smaller desert style riparian systems. So what do we do? What can we do? Low tech process-based restoration is sort of the technique we take, and let's break that down. Low tech means no engineering really, or very little engineering. Process-based, we try to look and see what process is broken and impact that process. And often it's these gullies and incised streams. That's really what we're trying to fix. So one strategy is, it's called a low rock dam or a one rock dam. There's many different names for them, and you can see that there in the upper right. This is in Arizona, and the landowner has built a series of these, and the gullies have filled them up, and he's actually having to build another set because he's captured enough sediment and kept that sediment and that water from leaving his property, and has had a great deal of success. And if you're interested in this stuff, there's plenty of search material or material online that you can find. A lot of it in Arizona. What do? We look to the past. These are really old ideas. This is indigenous knowledge, it's ancient knowledge, loose rock structures, trincheras, all of they're all meant to sort of better manage agricultural water and water for wildlife, water for human communities. You can see there on the left where they put several loose rock structures in a road gully. I don't think it's the same location on the right, but you get the idea. That slows the water. The water is able to soak in, not erode the soil, and grass can grow. These are a couple of loose rock structures that we put in here in Presidio County in West Texas. And you can see they're catching soil and growing plants. There's about 6 to 8 inches of sediment increased or accumulated on the upstream side of both of these structures. We're really happy with that. We built these with high school students. So volunteers are very important to our work sometimes. This is another example of a filter dam. This is a Zuni bowl. It's built with wood. Everything you've seen till now is built with rock, but this is built with wood, and this was up in one of the high meadows in New Mexico. Again, these are old ideas. Probably one of the big guns is something called a beaver dam analog. We call them brush weirs in West Texas. We don't have many beaver anymore, so we stick to terms that are a little less. Well, we stick to terms that don't confuse people, I guess. So these are pictures of beaver dam analogs. This is in Utah. They repair and size streams. They increase recharge. They basically work just like a beaver without the beaver being there. So they catch the sediment. They slow the water. They increase recharge. They water the plants. The wet season is increased. You know, a lot of streams that are in sides because the annual flows aren't connected to the floodplains. The wet season is very short, and these can increase that. This is a schematic of some of the structures we put in, just to give you an idea of that. This is construction. It's we get pre-made posts and drive them into the stream bed, and then bring in brush from some of our brush reduction projects in the neighboring grasslands, and stack the brush inside those post structures. And this is a set of beaver dam analogs or brush weirs in West Texas. This is just east of Fort Davis, Texas, in the Davis Mountains on Cienega Creek. And the interesting thing about this project, we finished in March of 2021, and in late April, early May of just a month later, we had an enormous storm, and this stream held water for 3 months. So the structures did not fail; they held, and this site has much more vegetation, and we've raised the stream bottom by more than a foot. So hopefully, with a few more storms, a few more productive monsoon seasons, we'll have the annual flows here on the floodplain again. And that's the last of my last slide.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Again, it makes me want to get out in the field. What incredible solutions to help birds in their habitat. Next up, we're going to have a short video before we have a next presentation. And so I'm going to get that set up.
De las 59 especies de colibríes que habitan en México, los bosques y selvas de la Sierra de Atoyac son testigos de la presencia del colibrí coqueta. Siempre evasivo y muy sigiloso, pero también un aguerrido defensor de lo que es suyo. Los colibríes coquetas visitan las flores de al menos 13 especies de plantas para alimentarse de su néctar. Su función como polinizador es vital para la reproducción de estas plantas, muchas de ellas de importancia ecológica e incluso económica en la región. Desafortunadamente, el colibrí coqueta de Atoyac se encuentra en peligro crítico de extinción. El área tan reducida que ocupa, además de su pequeño tamaño poblacional, que se estima no sobrepasa los 1.500 individuos, ponen en riesgo su existencia. Desde hace 5 años, personal experto en estudios de ornitología de la Universidad Autónoma de Guerrero realiza monitoreos para conocer más acerca de la ecología y distribución de este colibrí, además de promover acciones en favor de su conservación. Con el genuino interés por la conservación de los recursos biológicos de las comunidades locales y el continuo monitoreo del colibrí coqueta, se podrá tener mayor información que aún carece de aspectos básicos, como su reproducción, historia natural y comportamiento. Aún hay mucho que aprender. Está en todos nosotros proteger a este emblemático colibrí y a muchas otras especies que habitan la Sierra de Atoyac. Asegurar su existencia y evitar que sea declarado extinto depende de las acciones que emprendamos ahora. Pero abrigamos la esperanza de que este colibrí podrá seguir siendo admirado y valorado en el futuro, en los majestuosos paisajes que nos ofrece la Sierra de Atoyac.
What an incredible little hummingbird. And now we're going to hear from Carlos, who helped lead on these important efforts. Again, Carlos is a very important ABC partner, and it's so exciting to have him here today. Also, Carlos will be speaking in Spanish, and so friendly reminder to click on the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen if you need to switch for English translation.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, everyone. It is truly a pleasure to be able to be in this webinar today to show you the main results and outcomes of the conservation project of the short-crested coquette in Atoyac. It's what I'm going to show is a summary, because this is a huge project that we started back in 2018 with the firm intention and the main goal of keeping these species in the long term. That is the main goal that we have, to be able to keep it present in the habitats that where we can see it today. And as a context of geography, the Atoyac Sierra is in the state of Guerrero, in the southern part of Mexico. I'm going to show you a map with better details. All right, so here, the Atoyac area we consider a paradise of biodiversity. Just so you get an idea of where it is in Mexico, it's in the southern part in the state of Guerrero, and I'm going to use the pointer very quickly. In the central part of the state of Guerrero, we can find this mountain chain, and these are the borders of the Atoyac municipality. And as you can see, there is an altitude or elevation gradient, which is very complex. It basically comes from sea level until 3,000 meters above sea level. Actually, in the state of Guerrero, the tallest mountain is around 3,600 meters tall. It's located precisely in this municipality, in this part of the mountain chain. And to give you an idea of the different forests that are present in this mountain chain, in blue, we can see the cloud forest, which is one of the main habitats where the coquette, the short-crested coquette, is present, and also the tropical subdeciduous forest. And these two types of vegetation are also mixed with coffee plantations that maintain the coverage of the forest. And that is an important factor, so the habitat is not modified. Some areas, some plantations are mixed within these habitats, but they continue to remain small. So what we want to do is to keep these areas in a good conservation state so we can preserve the species as well. These are some images of the beautiful landscapes that you can find in the mountain chain. We have lots of water. It's very green with a lot of vegetation. We have different bodies of waters, ponds, rivers, and if you ever decide to come visit this area, I am sure that you'll have a fantastic time because the conditions present in this landscape are very important. And these are not just landscapes. We also find a lot of biodiversity, especially birds. We have over 330 species and only 1,115 square kilometers. And we have endemic species across the Atoyac mountain chain. And this is one of the most important mountain chains in Mexico and the Mesoamerica region. We have a lot of endemic species like this lady vireo, white-throated jay, which is endemic to the Sierra Madre del Sur, and most of these species live exclusively in cloud forests, and we also have migratory species that remain in the south of Mexico for a long time. The total of species, about most, like 35% of the species that we can find in this cloud forest are species that travel from Canada and Alaska, for example, and we also have other endangered species which are at risk, and they are facing serious threats, like the northern emerald toucanet is very threatened, the white-throated jay, which is endangered, and also the king vulture, which is part of one of the risk categories. And the Sierra de Atoyac is globally recognized for its importance for biodiversity conservation. It is acknowledged within the endemic bird areas of the world, which is an initiative to identify the most relevant areas because of the endemic species. And also it's part of the key biodiversity areas. It is also part as AZE site, the Alliance for Zero Extinction, and also it's part of CONABIO, which is the coordination of national biology and knowledge, which has this catalog of important areas for conservation, and it's also an important area for the conservation of birds. So this is a priority area for conservation because of all the bird diversity it holds, but also other types of animals that inhabit in the area. Specifically, or rather the reason of us being here in this webinar today is the short-crested coquette. It's a micro-endemic species isolated in the mountains of the state of Guerrero, specifically in this Atoyac mountain chain or Sierra de Atoyac. Is critically endangered according to IUCN. It has a very small population size, and although we don't have a precise estimate, we think that there is around 1,500 individuals. So we do need to carry out a survey to have a better idea of the size of the population. It is threatened by different factors, one of them being the changes in the use of land, which has increased in the last couple of years, and also the forest fires, which have been around for a good amount of years. And it also creates problems in the areas where we can find these species. And also these species inhabits forests. You can almost never find it in open spaces or open areas or forest openings. They are mostly within the forest or the coffee plantations. This is the potential distribution of the hummingbird. This is the state of Guerrero in the south of Mexico, and these are the political borders of the municipalities. The number 7 is the Atoyac municipality, and if you can see the red areas, those are the ideal spaces for the habitat of the coquette. That is why in Spanish is the coquette of Atoyac. It also spreads to other municipalities, but the majority of the area is concentrated in this municipality. The Short-crested Coquette project was created between ABC and the Autonomous University of Guerrero. The first phase took place in 2018, and it was basically the field work to recognize sites where we could find this hummingbird, recognize where we would be able to find it, confirm the areas, which because we had an idea of where they were, but we needed to be more precise, and also to look in other areas where we didn't have evidence of its presence. So we did the work and we explored the area. Here you can see a couple of photos of the hummingbird. Something very interesting that we found was that when we have lower levels of flowers, they substitute carbs and nectar with some soft and juicy fruits that have a high level of sugar, and this is their alternative when there are not that many flowers. They also eat smaller insects to be able to obtain protein. We found 14 species of plants that they use as food, and most of these plants are associated to the coffee plantations that are close to cloud forest and tropical subdeciduous forest. These are some amazing photographs of the hummingbird that were taken at the Atoyac mountain chains. The second phase, after we recognized the sites where the species was present, we developed workshops for the certification of protected areas in the habitats used by the coquette hummingbird. There is a category in the Mexican government, which is ADVC, and for its acronym in Spanish is Areas Voluntarily Designed for Conservation. So we visit areas where we can find the coquette, we talk about the hummingbird, we highlight the importance. We found people that would confuse it with other species, but there were people that would recognize it as well. And we tried to raise awareness for the importance of conservancy of these forests. And we also had voluntary meetings in the community, and the members voted in favor of the protected area. And we did this with most of the population. We got together with the decision makers of the community, and these are photos that show how people were involved and how people were voting in favor of a protected area. They were the ones that decided for the protection of their forests and the hummingbird. And in summary, this is the map. This is the Atoyac municipality that I was showing you before, and what you can see highlighted in orange is the protected areas that have been certified with the National Commission of Natural Protected Areas of the Mexican government. It's about 16,106 acres that were certified, and we have another 5,795 acres that are in the process of getting certified. This is the official certificate from CONANP, which is the Coordination for National Protected Areas. And here you can see a picture of a meeting with the head of this dependency of the Mexican government, and we have some representatives from the communities. We presented the project, the initiatives, and the programs that we consider important for the region. And the last phase, which is the one that we are still developing now, is capacity building with local communities. So we identified local groups to educate on monitoring of wildlife, monitoring the short-crested coquette, and the installation of trap cameras, so we have a better idea of the animals present. And we also set posters for species conservation and for the conservation of habitats within the region. And we also provided equipment for forest fire prevention, like trap cameras as well, guides. We provided them with uniforms and also some monitoring equipment so they could implement the management plan that we created together. And now that the areas are officially protected, we also work together to create the Bird Festival of Guerrero, where we had the participation of different communities that are present in the area. We provided information. It was very educational, and we communicated information about conservation of biodiversity, but especially about the hummingbirds and the birds. We also created this documentary. It's a mini documentary. You already saw the intro a couple of minutes ago. I think in the chat you're going to be able to find the link to the longest video, which is around 18 minutes. And we were also able to develop a guide for the birds present in the Atoyac with the goal of the community leaders and the voluntaries of the areas can carry out the monitoring practices, and also when we have visits from bird watchers, they can use these materials as part of the conservation initiatives that we have in the region. These are some illustrations that you can find in the guide. We have 252 species that are illustrated here. These illustrations were done by a student from the university, and we are very happy with them. We think that they turned out pretty well. And also we created a network of local guides. So if you ever decide to go to the Atoyac mountain chain or Atoyac Sierra to be able to do some bird watching or just to get to know the landscape, or if you just want to see the short-crested coquette in real life, you can get in touch with them via Facebook. There is no issue if you want to communicate in English. We can reply to any question that you have. So you can just get in touch with a group of guides. And if you ever decide to come visit the region, we will welcome with open arms, and we can guarantee that it is feasible and safe to do observations in this area. So I want to thank all of the institutions that have collaborated in the project. Of course, American Bird Conservancy and other dependents and other partners like dependencies from the Mexican government, because we think that it is a very noble thing to continue supporting projects like this. Thank you so much. I am available for whatever you want to contact me with. Thank you.
That was wonderful. What an incredible story. We have one more special guest, as I mentioned at the beginning, and Amy Upgren is going to now come on. Thank you, Amy.
Well, thank you, Jordan. Carlos, we're so grateful to have you as a partner and to be able to support your work in the Sierra de Atoyac. I started working with Carlos back in 2018, and it's been really amazing to see the project grow to what it is today. The short-crested coquette is one of 3,000 bird species that have been recorded at sites conserved by ABC and our partners over the last 30 years. This work and all of our bird conservation efforts are made possible thanks to members and supporters like you. If you've been inspired by today's presentations, I hope you'll join the 10 Million Acre Challenge today by becoming an ABC member or making your most generous gift yet in support of ABC's mission. I know firsthand what's possible when we all come together to help conserve birds, and I'm so excited for what we'll achieve together in the years ahead. I can't wait to share more conservation stories like these with you in the future. So please visit abcbirds.org/doubled right now, or scan the code that's on the screen with your phone to make a gift. And you can double your impact thanks to the Richard and Anna Marie Rosen Charitable Foundation. Thank you for taking action to help ensure a future for birds.
Thanks so much, Amy. We can't take all of that networking and coming together to help birds for granted. If I could please welcome our speakers back onto the screen. We have time for just one more question. Thank you so much to our really engaged audience. This webinar flew by, but I do want to make sure to ask our presenters one question before you all go, and that is, what is one thing that our presenters hope everyone takes away and shares with a friend? And we'll go in order of the presenters. So Kevin, if you wouldn't mind sharing.
Sure. I would just say the wider spread we can get the news well, news for some that grasslands are an important habitat, the better. Obviously, grasslands are impacted by people's food decisions. So we're all kind of directly involved with grassland habitats, and it's not just flyover country that a lot of people think it is when they're taking a flight across the country.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kevin. And Jeff.
I guess I'll echo some of that. You know, it's about habitat and what we can do to protect the habitat that's remaining or improve what's out there. So if you spend some time thinking about the hydrologic cycle, I'm a geek for that, and how you can interact with that. You know, maybe cut your lawn a little longer, not as less often at the yard scale, leave it a little less tidy for insects. Just think about the habitat that you can impact, and do what you can there.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Y Carlos?
Yes, I think it's very important to continue working conservation of endemic species or micro-endemic, like the short-crested coquette, and something that we are very interested in is continue supporting the alliances for conservation and especially local communities, because they are the ones that are directly linked to the natural resources. So we need to continue communicating conservation messages, and we can also bring something to the table to try to revert the problems that many of these species are facing, like the case of the short-crested coquette.
Muchas gracias, Carlos. Thank you so much again to all of our presenters. We really appreciate you taking the time to share your work with us and all of the work you do for birds. Thank you so much to our audience. Unfortunately, that'll now end the webinar, but again, all of these resources and the recording will be shared. It'll be online, it'll be on the ABC website. Thank you so much again for all of your support. Good birding.